And good morning. Good morning. There's 6 minutes to go before that. Yeah, thank you for Caitlin for introduction, and also thanks for the Prof. Farida excellent presentation on the abstract and the titles. Yeah, I think most of you have been benefit from her presentation on the title and also the introduction, the abstract writing. So I'm not going to touch too much on that because I think that another issue is that the time limitation. So I would like to emphasize more on the other part of the journal writing. Beside that, I would like to say that I won't go to take too long for the presentation because I limit my slide about 30 over slide only. So without wasting time, we start the title.
Sorry, Prof. Luqman. Probably you would like to enlarge your slides to make it to slideshow.
Okay. First of all, I'll introduce my title. It's a Career Academic Writing, some tips and common mistakes. Writing follow a rigid structure. The format developed over hundreds of years. So consequently, the paper can be read at the server level. Some people just want to write. Stand a higher chance to get published is one, you have a very rigid, regular and rigid data, that a strong data presentation. Second thing, that you must have a good language and the writing style. I think the first mark is subjective because it depends on individual research. Sometimes we might find that some people with a very moderate standard of result, but happen to be published in a very excellent or top journal. What happens is that if we look into the paper are very good in manipulate the data presentation, reporting in a very interesting way. And also what they do is that they have a very good language proficiency, and that's why they give a good impression to reviewer and editors. So objective academic writing is to report your finding and the conclusion clearly and concisely as possible. I think this has been emphasized by Prof. Farida before. I mean, concise is the keyword. Okay, if you are not writing a report, a wrong report for your boss or something, you're writing for the general readers that are interested in your field. Unless there is a review paper, usually the paper will be limited to a few thousand words, rather than maybe there's usually maybe 10 to printed page, about 10 to 12 pages or something like that. So unless you're writing a review paper, I have one review paper that has been published in the printed page for 60 pages. There's a different cases. Okay, so in English, if your English is not your first language, first of all, find a native English speaker if you can. Okay, to review the content and language of the paper before submitting it. That is very important because the first impression, if the journal manager found that your language is too poor, the first reason is they reject you is that not in good English. They will ask you to refine your English before you can submit to them. So regardless of primary language you have, find a colleague or editor to review the content or language for the paper. That's essential first step. So here I just generally introduce you that the component of paper, as you know that the title, the paper consists of title, of course secondly the author with affiliation, then abstract and keyword, which have been emphasized by Prof. Farida And also then followed by the introductions, method, result, discussion, acknowledgement, reference, and predict something if you have any. Okay, each of them play a different purposes. So I don't like to emphasize each of them, as you know that Prof. I mentioned that what's the purpose of the abstract and title and even the keyword. So introduction mainly is to explain the problem, give you some literature about your problem and background. So method is explain how the data be collected, how the experiment be carried out, and the result is to describe what you have been discovered. And discussion is discuss the implication of the finding. Acknowledgement ensure that those who help the research are recognized, especially you receive the funding from the university or from the government agency. So reference definitely, I always emphasize on reference because some journal editor, journal manager from format. So be careful of the reference format. And appendix and any other supplementary data that you might want to include. Okay, first of all, I want to declare that some of these content are not directly from what my previous note, because I have been presenting several times on the topic of the journal writing. So this time I found that this presentation from the editor of Springer Nature Scientific, he once presented in the University of Malaysia, and with a presentation consists of 216 slides, almost 2.5 hours presentation. So I found that some of the key points are very relevant and also very useful for the today's topic. So I actually pick up many of the information there that I concise to about 38 slides that out of the 216 slides that he presented. So this will be any such that I'll say that this presentation will be for the internet use. So I think to increase your chance of publication, I think Prof. had mentioned some of the tips that how to get your paper being accepted and get higher chances to be get published. So first of all, you have to clearly communicate your idea in writing. That's very important. People who understand what you try to deliver to them, what you try to tell them, what you try to let them understand, what you want to make them believe. Okay, logical guide of your leader through the study. You should have a logical, a structural presentation so that your leader can can understand from the beginning till the end what actually you try to do. So they don't have a puzzling during the reading of your publication or something. So they have to understand from the very beginning what's the background of your problem statement until what method you have been applying to solve the problem. What kind of finding you found and how you explain the implication of your work. So you should emphasize your study significant to editor and your target journal. So the editor are very concerned about what you try to deliver, what is your target, what is actually the significant finding on your papers, so that the editor can decide that your work is actually suited into their scope of journal or others. So it's a particularly important thing you have to keep in your mind. 3 important learning rules in the good writing. As I said, that 3 keywords. That first is a concise. What I mean by concise is that how much new information leader can process. So that your leader cannot digest what actually you try to do. You focus, especially you have such a short title that you try to deliver more than the title can bear. So that's very important that to understand that what you try to do, and you try to highlight that in your presentation of your paper. So we'll discuss it later, more detail how we do that. Okay. So another keyword here is that assuming that your leader knows that what you know. That's a mistake. Yeah, a lot of authors, just what they call it in Malay words, like shock sendiri. What I mean that you find yourself fun, that you think that you assume that all your leaders know what you try to write. You write whatever you throw to them, they have to accept, and they make sure that they really understand what you write. That's very big mistake. You see that we might be very well known about our work, I mean, we must be very well about our work, because this is your work. You run the experiment, you do the work, you do the study, so you understand what is A to Z, what your work. However, you shouldn't expect that your leader will know everything. Every detail you find out, and all the explanation you try to present to them. It's a big mistake that you assume that they know everything. So it's your job, it's your role, it's your responsibility to make sure that they understand your work very well. So this is your responsibility. So the last word is logical. Just now we mentioned about logical presentation. So what is logical presentation? You have a good frequent sequence of your presentation. For the beginning, introduction, introduce your background, introduce your work, then what's the problem statement, what your objective you try to solve, okay, what problem statement you try to solve, and what is the objective you want to achieve, and also your methodology you use, and also what kind of finding you have and how you interpret the data, and of course what conclusion you achieve. This is a logical order of your presentation that you always have to present to your reader. Concise. So a little bit more to detail on the concise. What is concise? Use short sentence. The mind has a limited processing capability. So don't expect that the human mind can process so many things in a few seconds. So people can only process 7 to 9 pieces of new information at a time. So what do you need to do? 10 to 20 words per sentence, and varying the sentence length to make writing more interesting. So don't use too long, too lengthy quick sentences, because that will really bore your reader and confuse them and make them puzzle what I actually try to tell them. So make sure sentence short and easy to understand. Okay, and maybe vary the sentence length so that make the writing look more interesting. So one idea per sentence will be sure that to explain the idea to the reader. So it's good that I suggest that you use only one idea per sentence and be sure to really thoroughly explain the idea to the reader. That's very important, that so the reader won't get confused. So another thing that we need to avoid is unnecessary word. Do not use the word that do not add any value to your ideas. So for example, always ask yourself that, can you delete this word without changing the meaning of the sentence? If yes, then delete those words. Why you need the additional word that if they can be deleted or can be ignored? You see, sometimes we like to write a long sentence so that we feel that more confident. Actually, that's unnecessary. Scientific writing should be concise. So unnecessary words should be delayed. Here are some examples. You see, I think even in the thesis, you always found this kind of word. It's well known that most of the intent diffraction peaks or blah, blah, blah. You see, it's very well known, so that you don't have to tell. Just say that most of the intent diffraction peak, that's all, and blah, blah. It's worth mentioning. Okay, we know that it's worth mentioning. So don't have to put a word mentioning. Just say that the social motivation. I don't. If there's no word mentioning, you don't have to put in your journal. Okay. As described previously in our previous study, you see, you duplicate the word. You already described previously, so it's definitely your previous word. So you don't have to emphasize that this is your previous word. Of course, you described previously means that this is the previous word. So as a matter of fact, just like always, what well known is well known, or it's a fact. Since it's a fact, you don't have to emphasize it. So you found that the low temperature reaction, blah blah blah. Then so forget about as a matter of fact. Unless you're doubtful about your work, okay? You want to tell the reader that this is fact, but what's the point? If there's a fact, there's always a fact. So you don't have to emphasize that as a matter of fact. You actually the doubtful feeling to the reader that your work, you are not feeling confident about your finding. Okay, the last one, the last example. A number of studies have shown that, okay, the study group, blah, 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 blah. You see that it's a number of study or whatever, it doesn't matter. We say, because themselves, it says this unnecessary word. Even to delete them, those words, it won't change the original meaning you try to deliver to your reader. So, for example, like that, it was evident that you can just use evidently. It was possible that, you can say possibly. It's interesting to note that, not really. That's all. Okay. If there's another reason why, so you just put therefore we believe. Yeah, that's why the sentence will be more concise. In order to just in case to do that, just to evaluate the reaction time. So in order to evaluate the reaction time, why do you want to put it in order to just put directly to evaluate them? It's clear that definitely query is better because query and we explain that is clear. More concise and more clean, I would say. Use a strong word. We make indicate that what is still we still have no idea what is the sentence word you use. So if you say I will make a study, we make a what, make an assumption or something, you just assume that you are not really confident about or what you are unclear about what you are going to do. So change the word into like we estimate, we decide, we confirm. So this we're very direct and clear to tell people that what you actually try to do, because you're trying to estimate, you try to decide, you try to confirm something. So it's very strong word. Example here, we perform analysis to investigate if adding a surface modified fiber led to an improvement in the non-composite mechanical strength and resulted in the 5 words. So you see the next example that we after we modify. So you see we replace the analysis and something, we just delete them. We say that we investigate if adding surface modified fiber improve the composite mechanical strength and reduce cost. You see the whole sentence become very concise and the meaning still clearly delivered to the reader. The same meaning. What you say half of the word, almost half of the words. Okay, from 25 words you reduce to 14 words. You see that you can say a sentence, make a sentence more clearly and more strong. That's very important to make the sentence concise and clear. Some common academic writing mistake. Never assume your leader know what you do. As I mentioned just now, don't think that your leader is a Superman or your leader is an Einstein. They know almost everything. Unless you think that you are dealing with the encyclopedia. Okay? You need to provide enough information for the new knowledge. Otherwise, your work is just a piece of the textbook material. Because if you cannot deliver to your leader that if your information is not new, it's nothing new to deliver. So what's the point that you need to submit your paper? So your leader want to know that anything novel, anything new from your work. So that it's your responsibility to provide them enough information so your reader can easily understand the content of your new knowledge, highlight the significance of your work. So you need to link the new knowledge with the existing knowledge. The job of the researcher. One of the purpose I always emphasize to my student in research methodology class is on the literature review, is to man the literature review is to serve as the gap of knowledge. So the same thing as writing an academic journal. Then you want to tell the reader what is the gap of knowledge that you are trying to link between the previous work and your current work. What is the current you're trying to solve? What is the gap of knowledge you try to tell us? Okay, so it's the gap of knowledge work. This indicate your novelty. So common problem in academic writing. So introduction, you not define the idea or theory clearly, or do not identify the research problem. These are all the common problems that always happen in the writing. Especially in the introduction, you never define the idea or theory. What kind of theory or idea you try to use or apply in here. And do not identify your research problem. What's the problem statement? If you don't have a problem, then how come you have an objective? I once read one of my colleagues' paper. I found that one interesting thing. The paper is overall is quite a good writing. I mean, a piece of work, good work. But one thing I found very interesting is that at the introduction part, she doesn't indicate the research problem and she doesn't indicate the objective, but she got the methodology, she got the result and conclusion. But after I read the whole paper, I don't know what problem he's trying to solve. That's a mistake. Okay, I think that's also a mistake as a student, because she just graduated from her PhD. She tried to use her PhD thesis to write a paper. So this is a common problem when you transfer your data from thesis direct to the paper. Sometimes you might ignore certain parts of that. So how about the method and result? Many people do not describe clearly a detailed methodology. That's very important to allow that the reader or the other researcher who interested in your work, they might be able to duplicate your work. So, and you should provide the detailed methodology to the leader, so that in any case that they want to repeat your experiment, they can conduct the experiment according to your step. So, and also for the result discussion part, you do not describe significant data. You're just presenting the data. Okay, this is the trend, this is the whole. But what is the significance of the data? It's not having highlighted in your text. And that's a very big common mistake, that people might be describing the data instead of interpreting the data. Okay, and highlighting what is the significance of the data. Okay, as a conclusion, people might take granted for the conclusion. So they're almost the end of the word, so that you just copy whatever from the text. No, that is not the way. So one mistake people do is that you do not discuss the implication. And that's a very common thing that happens to most of the students who wrote the paper. That not you discuss what the implication you have found from your finding. Okay, and also a lot of people forget to tell others that what kind of future direction you can do. I mean, what will lead to? This is research. Research is a never-ending process. It should be a continual process instead of the finite process. It's an infinite process, means that you always have the continual work that can be done after your work. So you should highlight a sentence or two. What's the future direction of your work? Okay, that's very important. Okay, something you might need to beware is that, like qualitative work, some, most, about, few. These are very puzzling work or very abstract work. They don't give you exactly what indicate. So you see that you can see, for example, few example experience fracture when exposed to increased loading of fiber. So how many samples you are talking about? You should tell people that precisely how many samples you actually use, and how many samples you collect every experiencing a fracture when exposed to intrusion pressure or something. So you should have to indicate the number quantitatively. Okay, no, don't use the qualitative word, because that's very puzzling and also very abstracting. A word subjective word. What kind of word is considered subjective? Subjective words such as surprisingly, strikingly, interestingly. Academic writers should be objective, not subjective. You don't say, oh, surprisingly. You say really surprised. Yeah, maybe you think that it's surprising because the first time you might know you found the result in that way, but other might not feel the same as yours. So your leader might not feel that's surprising as what you feel. So avoid this type of strikingly, surprisingly, interestingly word in your text, because you might not expect the leader to think the same way as you think, or they might think that reflect the lack of knowledge in your work. Yeah, because the people might think that because you don't have enough study, so that you're very surprised with your own data. A word complex word. Yeah, somebody like to use bombastic word. They copy from other journal some of the bombastic word they use without understanding the real meaning of the word. You see, some people try to show that how good their English proficiency by using some kind of the word the vocabulary that make them feel like maybe they think that they are the Shakespeare, or maybe who else, or you don't know. Maybe they thought that they are some of the good reader. Maybe the woman would think that they may think that they might be kind of You see, there's a common mistake that some people try to play that this out. About the literature, they might very good in reading the English literature. They like to use the play the kind of vocabulary. But remember, this is a scientific writing. This never be a playground for a literature study. So unless you are from the literary background, otherwise you try to avoid a complex word. So it should be written in a very clearly and simply to the reader on other discipline. And the reader from whom English is not their first language. You have to expect that a lot of the reader might not from the English might not be their first language. So they might found the difficulty when you play you use a very complex word or the very bombastic word there. So for example, to ascertain the efficiency of the program, we integrate the participant upon the completion. So like using the ascertain efficaciousness, you can actually replace that with to determine the success of the program. We question the participant upon completion. You see, these are the simple words, clear and simple. The participant, even not the first language, the English is not the first language, can easily understand that what you try to deliver. So using those bombastic words unless that's necessary. So I think that most of the students like to borrow the word, the bombastic word from other literature without really understand the meaning. That's very dangerous. Okay, you can see that the example, the topic sentence. You know, here the highlight that in the red color is the topic sentence. This is the introduction part. So although the water is abundant in on Earth, 98% of the available water resources in the form of the salty water. So in fact, the shortage of fresh water is one of the most pervasive problems affecting human society and so on. The blue, see from this paragraph, this is the introduction, you can see that the first sentence is a topic sentence. What is the main topic you want to highlight here? This is the word related to desalination. That means that the desalting process. Okay, so the first sentence already highlight the water is you try to treat water is an issue. The salty water that you have lack of the fresh water. So because our Earth is consisting mainly of the salty water. So this explains the topic of the desalination. So the further sentence or the blue color is trying to develop further about part here are trying to explaining about your topic. And the last sentence of the first paragraph here, you see, is a stress sentence. You to stress your idea in the paragraph. So what you try to do, see, there's for identification of the more efficient and cost-effective design method are necessary. So at the end of your paragraph, you emphasize that what is the urgency of the method. So by doing that, so follow that the same thing. The next one further elaborate your the topic sentence and so on in your introduction. So two factors when consider writing a manuscript: logical and organizing your idea. That's how we say that one of the key after the concise is the logical order. So you should logical order your idea. So it's good that you write an outline. Yeah, and you, of course, good organizing plus the good communicating of the English. Then both of them combine to write in the writing of the good manuscript. So English is one thing, which if you are the first language I mentioned before, you should find a helper to write your to review your English. But one thing you can definitely do is a logical organizing your idea. It's good that before you write your journal, you write an outline about your work, what you're trying to present. What outline? It's good that we discuss with the co-author and your colleague. What your content, is that your content suitable? Is that content enough to be a paper? Or is that your content have any novelties? And what is your significant your content? So it's good that to have a discussion and make discussion okay, before you actually go and proceed into your paper. So that will help you to save your time. Ensure the core author agree with the outline content before writing the manuscript. This is good that to get agreement that all the core author agree that this is the content we're going to present, and this is to avoid the misunderstanding or maybe any argument after the paper has been accepted. And some of the authors might disagree with any content. So first of all, get a discussion and get the outline done. So when writing a manuscript, it's encouraged to start writing by section. I mean, there's a common mistake of most of the writers that they are very ambitious. They want to write at one time the whole paper out. I think that's good. If you are ambitious, if you are a good writer, you can immediately write the whole papers. I know that some writers they can write a paper very easily. So some topic, okay, especially material science, I always like to highlight that, especially like composite material, polymer science, something, absorption, or some of the topic of the research. I always found that there's a good template that the people can actually follow. If you read my first master student who published 7 papers that year, he told me one thing. I still remember until today. I asked him why you can easily write a paper. He said that after reading 100 over papers in the same topic or field, he found that there's a regulation or workout, so-called template in the layman term, that about the same field. People can easily follow the certain rule to write in a certain topic. I think that some of the researchers are very good in this. They found that, okay, if I want to write a paper on biocomposite, I will write that, okay, this is a way, a strength of mechanical property. This will consist of tensile strength, SEM, or it might be put there a little bit of chemical characterization or something. Most of the people present their way. The only thing make it different is that some people might add some kind of advanced characterization method, and some people might use advanced material. I mean, most of the content or format, logical orders are quite similar. If you read enough paper in the same field, you might find some kind of similarity among those papers. Because it's good that you want to write in the top journal, especially like composite science and technology, composite A, composite B, that maybe you might want to increase certain novel ideas that maybe in more in-depth declaration, they will always become the new idea. So I would always say that, like step by step, write section by section, don't be hurried. So easily refer to mean that you might want to focus on the methodology first, because that's the easiest part that you can write on the whole paper, because you are the one who carry out the experiment. You are the one who, if you are the postgraduate student who are then you have your thesis, the methodology is our chapter 3, so you can easily copy them and make it more concise. And of course, refer to the journal format, how the people always presenting their methodology method in the journal style, not in the thesis style. We should put too much information. So it will also help you to be less stressful in writing the paper. So you won't feel that stress if you write. Because if you are so ambitious, you want to write a whole paper in one day, then you might be so stressful, or maybe a few days, or maybe in a week. So you should take time to write the paper slowly, I mean section by section, because it helps you to identify what error or maybe any question arising during the writing. So you can always get feedback from one section while beginning to write a next section. You can always discuss with your supervisor or your colleague, your co-authors about your section you have written. And it will reduce your downtime, because after the completion of the amendment you have made, then you can be free, the section can be free from the error. So you also receive. Before you begin, what is you should think? What is the focus of your paper? Ask yourself this question. What's the research question? What exactly is a research question you want to highlight in the work? Why is it so important? If you had to know that if your work is not important, neither of the reader will think is not unsure about what is important about your work. yeah, then you do not expect the reader will understand that too. Is it unknown, limitation, or only controversy on the work? So you should ask yourself, any of these elements appear in your work, okay? And what is our aim? What's the objective? What are you trying to achieve? You see, you should ask yourself what you plan to achieve, and how is this directly related to the problem? You see, your objective should relate to your problem statement. So you should, just like your thesis writing, you should have a problem statement. You should know what is the objective you want to achieve. Okay. Conclusion is always answerable to your research objective or research question. So how is answerable to your question? How is advance the field? How you help the reader or researcher to advancing the knowledge in the field that you're presenting, you are working on. So your contributions to advance the knowledge in the field that you are interested in. So always remember this thing before you start. Introduction. Ask yourself, what do you do this study? So I mentioned that what is a research question. So in a method, what do you do? Yeah, and result discussion. What do you find? And conclusion. How does you study and what field? These 4 questions, ask yourself before you start writing your manuscript. That will help you to actually have a clear guideline, and you can prepare your outline of your manuscript. Okay, introduction. What is known about the topic? This is the introduction. So it should be what is up-to-date study. You are familiar with the current state of the field. That's important of your literature review. Unlike the thesis, your literature reviews are limited to those related to the topic. So the topic should be of current interest. So you don't have to cite something that 1922, 1915, or thing. It should be something that the people are interested currently. So you should have related some literature that what people have done currently and try to indicate the gap on your knowledge. So cite broadly, wide. You don't cite on the problem only in your so let's say you only have what happened in Malaysia, what only happened to maybe Sedang. This is too limited. The topic should be international interest. Malaysia or something, it should be happen to be the knowledge that can apply to advancing the researcher in their field in other places. Yeah, mean that they can borrow your knowledge, your experience, that they can apply to the same problem they face in their country or their region. Okay, here's an example. You see that somebody expertise the topic. So when you do the introduction, you can see that the first part of the work, that is additional analysis. Then the second, followed by the highlight what the challenge you're facing in your topic, and what's the limitation of the literature, and what's the mean that the gap of knowledge you're trying to highlight, and what are you proposed to do, and that aim to your objective. Okay, what you propose to do, what you propose to solve. So what does your study need to be done? So introduce the topic, worldwide, regional, relevant. So broad specialized audience. You have to understand that what your problem is a worldwide problem or regional is relevant. Your audience, your target is a broad audience or just specialized audience. Okay, that's what you have to know. So what's known about the topic? Use up to date the study. So don't use a very too old literature. Cite broadly what why. So you should cite broadly what the reference from all over the world if possible. What is not known? Clearly stated your limitation, clear description of the problem, and what is the problem, and use a keyword like however, then lead to our specific aim, the objective. After the introduction, usually we will follow by the methodology, method or material methods. So researchers in the field will reproduce your finding. You see, this is why you need to present your method clearly so that they can reproduce your finding, they can duplicate your finding and build on your research. I once heard about the case that a professor from Korea who actually cheated in their result, and some researchers tried to reproduce their findings, they failed to achieve that. That's very bad, you see. Then if people are caught you that you are actually facing their data or something, then you might be lose your reputation in the academic field or even the research area. Okay, so the peer review will evaluate your study design and to validate your result. The peer review might not replicate your research experiment, but they can evaluate your study design. They look at how your design experiment, so they can validate your result. Is that appropriate? That's appropriate method to carry out the experiment, to do the study, so that they can validate your result is that appropriate or very reliable. What do they need to know about the method? Who and what are used in the study? Actually, if you are doing the social science, who are the target group, and you are doing experiment, what actually are we used in the study? How you conduct the study, the method, the detail of your experiment, or your design of experiment, whatever. You need to highlight that and detail and describe that in more detailed manner. Okay, how the data was analyzed, that's important. People want to know that how you do the analyze the data, how you do the error analysis, sort of thing. Have you provide any standard deviation? How many samples you duplicate? Sort of things. So they want that so that they can confident that your results are reliable and can be validated. Here are the example. So the title here is that what you have done. And here, the first paragraph indicates the material you use, apply in the experiment, and the condition. You see that sometimes if a method is too detailed, then you want to highlight that the previous method have been cited in previous study, then you put a reference. Then followed by the condition that you apply in the experiment, your research, and any additional information you want to highlight here. So you can also include in the methodology. And there's a way of to present the information. Okay, I think somebody asked me about to highlight this part. They say that they are very poor in result interpretation and finding. I think I will highlight a little bit on this, okay, because the time is constrained and now already sometimes already 36. So I would like to highlight a little bit here. So guide result is very important part that determine your paper will be accepted or rejected. So the purpose of the result is to guide your reader through your finding. So a logical presentation is very important. First of all, it's a little bit of introduction about your result. So followed by development of the result and what's important of the result. So for example, fabricate a new membrane for water treatment, evaluate a physical and chemical property, for example, under different temperature or pressure, efficacy or remove particle contamination, or this sort of thing. So guide a reader through the finding. Result, here subheading 1, you see that introduce the experiment, you have like figure 1, so into figure 1, what is the figure 1 about? Describe what the data you obtain, okay, your profile, what is the indication of the data, and summarize the key finding. You should not just presenting your data, okay, it look like that the category 1 is higher than category 2 or whatever. But you never really summarize your findings. So every result with the introduction of the figure, the tables, what's the table about, what's the figures about. Table 1, describe what. Then what's the table, the data presenting, then summarize what the key finding. Okay, then finish, then you follow by the second table or second figures. The same routine follow. Okay. Here are the examples that you see. Table 3 shows the site C have the lower soil level. Then we get compared with those at the side A, blah blah blah, and B. However, side B have higher. Blah, blah. This is, you use the words however here to posting, the side posting the guide leader. You see from what here, you combine two information together. So it's very important to use some keyword here to side posting to two ideas. Because the table 3 highlight that where the leader can find the relevant data. Okay, result, the logical flow result, what claim? So we want to introduce your figure 1, what's that figure 1 about? Then supporting the claim with data, what to show that they explain the data and what the data indicate. So summarize the important thing. Okay, maybe do a comparison, whatever. So use keyword to guide your leader through your finding. It's very important that to use a keyword to guide your leader throughout the finding. You can see the title, average is the title of your figures. Figure 4, average vertical flow speed of the main blah blah blah. This figure is our explanation about the figures. So people understand what is the figure about. So introduce in the result expansion, you can see that the first sentence introduce what the figure from the brain plum. Figure 4, orange article on the onset of the explosion can be seen in the district peak in the velocity at time 0. This explains what the figure 4 about. And followed by the blue color part, which is the supporting data. You further exploitation for exporting, when extrapolated elaborate the data about illustrate the data, what's the data about. Right? So then at the end of the paragraph, you should summarize that, what's the key point of your data presentation, so that people understand that what you have to tell us that, okay, you have been explaining what the data is like, what the important point of the presentation of your data. So the logical flow, similar to the result logical flow. So we have this the logical flow for the result discussion. First, also the introduction and supporting claim with data, and also summary or the conclusion. That's the key point of your figure or data or tables. So you can see here one of the figures here. Yeah, you can see that. You see, okay, here I want to highlight one thing. Yeah, some students tend to do one picture, one figure. Sometimes for comparison purpose, it's advisable that to combine a few different figures. Here you see that they are not only combining the SEM photo, they are also combining the other. This is a frequency profile, the frequency profile into here, because they are interrelated. So they combine all these two data together into one picture, one figure, so that they can do a kind of comparison or maybe the discussion or analysis in the same picture. Because the first thing, you have to make sure that all these are the interrelated data. So you can see that the same thing for the discussion. You have an introduction sentence to explain what is figure 3 about. Then your further supporting data to elaborate more about the figure 3, what figure 3A about 3B, what are the things, major supporting, elaborate. Then the discussion part, interpolation, you compare with the previous study. Here, you see, there's a difference between the result and discussion. If you only write the way in the result, some people write the paper that result as one section, discussion and other section. So that's a different way. But if you, a most common way is that we combine the result and discussion into one paragraph. So this is the way. So it starts with the introduction, with the supporting data. Then you compare your current data with the previous study. And this is mean that the part is a interpolation. You try to interpolate the data. And of course, you summarize your key finding. So discussion is to summarize what you have done. Okay, what you did. So introduce the topic, state the research problem, summarize the key finding. So interpret your finding, similarity or different with other work, unexpected or negative result if you have any. So you have to highlight that, and what is the limitation of your work. And also you have to emphasize that what is important to the field. That's the main conclusion of the work, the data, the conclusion of the finding, and what implication you have from your finding. This is particularly important, that to let the reader understand that why your work is important. Important of the conclusion. Yeah, this is the part that people always take for granted. Because you might think that, okay, conclusion, that's the last thing that people will read. People will not pay enough attention about that. No, because if there's a professional reader or a professional reviewer, they will read the first sentence until the last one. So it's the last thing to read, the conclusion. So what is remembered most by your reader about your study? So you have to conclude everything, the answerable to your objective, your research problem, so that to make that the reader can actually easily to recall what your major finding and what you achieved from your research. So what do you want your reader to remember? The main conclusion, the solution of the problem, the key finding, one of the two most important findings, implication, what's the contribution of the field, and future direction, how to build your. This is important thing that how you build how the people will continue from your work in future. You see, so your conclusion can consist these 4 parts. So this is work. So you have a conclusion in the green color part. This is what you conclude here. Here the purple color part is highlight the key finding and your work. Not just repeating what you write in your text or discussion, but it's just to summarize what the key finding, and then you emphasize again your implication of the work. Okay, then maybe follow 1 or 2 sentences about your future direction. Avoid empty implication. Don't say that this study will provide new insight. This study will provide better understanding. Be specific. So, which insight? If you say that these are the new insight, so tell the reader what's the new insight you try to highlight here. So, what the new insight that your study have emphasized, your study have highlighted, and you say that there's a better understanding. So, how does the study help us to improve our better understanding? So, this is what something you have to tell that in modern. Don't do the sentence too abstract or too empty. Yeah, you give an empty promise about to the reader that, but the reader doesn't know what you're trying to tell them. Okay, I think I want to end here. Thank you for your patience and to listen to my presentation. Thank you very much. Feeling I pass to you.
Thank you so much.